Hello, everybody. Welcome to this video. And in this video, we are going to go over the study guide for the second midterm exam in this course. So you can see on the screen that here's a study guide for the midterm 2, which is the second midterm exam for this course. And in the second midterm, 5 chapters, the content that from 5 chapters will be covered. You can see chapter 6 about learning, chapter 7 about cognition, language, problem solving, and intelligence, chapter 8 about memory, chapter 9 about developmental psychology, and chapter 10 about motivation and emotion. So these 5 chapters will be covered in the second midterm exam. So the midterm exam will be next week. The format is very similar to this first midterm exam in this course. I think you are already familiar with that kind of format. So some detailed information will be posted online on Canvas in announcement later. So in this video, we are going to review and go over the study guide for this midterm exam. So the first chapter not first chapter, but the chapter 6 about learning, we can see this knowledge, these concepts you need to know about. So you need to know the meaning of these concepts. For example, the first one is associative learning. So let's see what's in the slides about these concepts. So in the slides, associative learning is the basic type of learning. So the foundation of learning is associative learning. So what is learning? So learn that something is related to other stuff. So connect the events and the stimuli together. That is called associative learning. So that is most basic type of learning, the foundation of all kinds of learning. Yeah, that is associative learning. And also some other concepts about classical conditioning. So classical conditioning is a really important part in this chapter. There are a few concepts involved in the process of classical conditioning. We must know them. For example, unconditioned stimulus, unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, conditioned stimulus, and a conditioned response. So all these are the stimulus and the response. So we must know what those are. So in this experiment that Ivan Pavlov did, so there is a meat powder in front of the dog. The dog is salivating because the dog wants the meat. And later there is a bell ringing in front of the dog. So in this case, the meat is a stimulus, but it's unconditioned stimulus. So you don't have to do any kind of a conditioning to stimulate the dog to salivate. The meat powder just creates the response from the dog. So it's unconditioned stimulus. And the salivation of the dog is unconditioned response because the dog doesn't have to be trained or to be conditioned to have that kind of response. It just naturally has that kind of a response in front of the meat powder because that dog is hungry probably. So that is an unconditioned response. And if you ring the bell to the dog, the dog does not salivate. It doesn't do anything. So the ringing of the bell in this case, in this moment, is a neutral stimulus. And later, the second step, the meat powder is there, and the ringing, the bell is ringing. So always pair the meat powder and the ringing of the bell. They happen at the same time, for multiple times. The dog learns something. The dog learns that, okay, the meat powder is paired with the ringing of the bell. The ringing of the bell has some kind of a special meaning. When there is ringing of the bell, the meat powder shows up. So that's the learning process for the dog. The dog is conditioned to salivate in front of the ringing of the bell. So in this case, salivation is the response, but it's a conditioned response. And the ringing of the bell becomes the conditioned stimulus. It used to be a neutral stimulus, but it becomes a conditioned stimulus because during the process, after the process of conditioning, the dog learns that, okay, the ringing of the bell has some kind of a special meaning to the dog. The dog learns that, oh, I need to salivate in front of the bell. When the bell is ringing, I need to salivate. So the ringing of the bell becomes the conditioned stimulus. And the salivation in front of the ringing of the bell becomes the conditioned response. So these are the basic introduction of these concepts. And the next part is about operant conditioning. So operant conditioning is also a big part in this chapter. It's another type of conditioning, operant conditioning. So in operant conditioning, we need to know the meaning of operant conditioning. So it's different from classical conditioning. So in classical conditioning, just the association between two stimuli. And in operant conditioning, animals or humans learn to associate a behavior with the consequence of that behavior. So there is a behavior done by that animal or human, and that behavior follows a certain kind of consequence. And animals need to learn that, oh, that kind of behavior is associated with some kind of consequences. That learning process is called operant conditioning. So there is an action, and that action creates some kind of effect or influence or consequences. There are consequences for what you have done. That is operant conditioning. So there are some concepts related to operant conditioning. We need to know that. And one thing is reinforcement. The other thing is punishment. So reinforcement is any stimuli that increase the frequency of certain behavior. That is reinforcement. Something can increase the likelihood of that kind of behavior. That is the reinforcement of that behavior. So that stimuli reinforce that behavior. It means that stimulus that can increase the likelihood of that behavior. Because of that reinforcement, because of that stimulus, the behavior is more frequent, is more likely to occur. That is called reinforcement. For example, in this case, there's in this Skinner box in the slide. When there is a when the mouse pushes the lever, presses the lever, there is the food showing up. So the food is actually the reinforcement. It's increase the likelihood of pressing the lever for that mouse. So the mouse presses the lever more and more to get the food. So the food is a type of reinforcement. Of course, there is a positive reinforcement, there's negative reinforcement. You can review that. There are two kinds, but they are both like something to increase the likelihood of behavior. And another type of kind of a stimulus is like punishment. So what is a punishment? punishment is something that can decrease the likelihood of behavior. It's the opposite of reinforcement. Something can decrease the likelihood. The behavior does not really occur that frequently, that likely because of the punishment. That is called punishment. For example, the Peter, a 5-year-old boy, lies to his parents, and parents spank Peter every time Peter lied to his parents. So spanking is it's a punishment because it decreases the likelihood of lying for Peter. So punishment also has two kinds. There's positive punishment and there is negative punishment. So you need to know there are two kinds, but basically you need to know what reinforcement is, what the punishment is. And a third type of learning that we talk about is observational learning. So we need to know what observational learning is. In observational learning, we are not involving like something about conditioning is not involved. We humans just observe others and learn from others. Learn by watching. We watch others doing something and we learn from them. That is observational learning. That is really frequent to happen for people, for humans, to learn something. We don't have to involving like classical conditioning to learn something. And we can go to next chapter, chapter 7. In chapter 7, we have covered a lot of the topics. So we need to know the meaning of these concepts, such as cognition. So we need to know what cognition is. So we learned a lot of the topics in cognitive psychology. So we need to know what cognition is. Cognition is thinking. There's a lot of components, elements in thinking, in cognition. So such as knowledge, judgment, language, memory, perception, sensation, and stuff. So the next concept we need to know about is concept. So what is concept? In the mind, we form different kinds of concepts. It's a way to organize the information. And we store those concepts in the brain. And so we can efficiently use those knowledge. So we organize information into different concepts for us to understand this information. And the schemata is a collection. A schemata is a collection of different concepts that are related. So our brain does not only form concepts, it also forms schemata, different kind of schemata. It's a mental construct that consists of a collection of related concepts. Such as a role. A role is a kind of a schemata. So such as a student role. So a student it can be a concept, but it can be a schema. So because in that role, there are a lot of the stuff, right? So going to class, writing assignments, and so forth. And that is about schemata and concept. And the next concept is language. So what is language? We use languages to communicate among people. So it's a communication system that involves using words and grammar, which are systematic rules. So those systematic rules can organize the words into meaningful information. So that is basically a communication system. And in that system, there are words, which are lexicon, and there are rules, which are grammar. So rules, we need to use grammar to organize the words into certain ways so that we can understand each other. So if we do not have like common grammar to communicate with, we cannot understand each other, even though we understand the words. And another concept is critical period. Critical period happens in the process of language development. So when people start to learn language, develop their language skills, there is a critical period. Seems to be a critical period because they found that any children can learn and master any language before age 5. So before age 5, the children have learned the most of that language, have been really fluent at that language, have been really good at that language. So that is a critical period. In that critical period, people can master that skill, which is language, very quickly, very good. Algorithm and next algorithm and heuristic. These two words, these concepts are from a content about problem solving. So there are different kinds of problem solving strategies. Algorithm is one of them. And another one is called heuristic. Algorithm is just a very detailed formal instructions to solve a problem. So there's steps in a algorithm. You can just follow every step in that algorithm so that you can get a solution for that problem. So that is called algorithm. It's like an instruction book for some kind of a electronic devices, like for TV. If you buy a TV, you can give you a instruction book. You open the instruction book and read it. And you can, if you want to do anything, realize some kind of functions, you just follow the steps in that instruction book, if you like. Heuristic is totally different from algorithm. So heuristic are mental shortcuts. Depends on feelings, depends on like intuitions. Suddenly there's a feeling, there's a solution in my mind, in our minds, in the mind. Suddenly there is a solution comes to the mind, and people feel like that is a way, that is the right way to solve that problem. That is a heuristic. It's very quick, but it does not guarantee the problem can be solved. Oftentimes the heuristics are wrong, but it's so quick. People rely on heuristics all the time. Not all the time, but oftentimes. And these concepts are about intelligence. So intelligence is also a big part in this chapter 7. Crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence. So it's one way to classify intelligence. So crystallized intelligence includes the knowledge, the different kinds of knowledge, and the ability to use that knowledge when the situation needs it. So there is knowledge in the mind, and we can use any kind of knowledge in our mind when we need it. So that is called crystallized intelligence. So it's not a flowing. It's just there. So it's called crystallized intelligence. And another type that is different from crystallized intelligence is called fluid intelligence. That is the ability to solve real problems. That's the ability to see the relationships in real problems and give the right solutions to those problems. So that is really flexible, and it depends on the situation, depends on that case. So that is called fluid intelligence. And another thing that we need to know about is multiple intelligence theory. We need to know how many amounts are there in this theory. So in multiple intelligence theory, there are 8 types. We don't have to know each type particularly. We don't have to know the names of each of the intelligences. If you like, you can, but in the text, we don't have to know about it. We just need to know there is a theory called multiple intelligence theory. It says that there are different kinds of intelligences that people can have, and there are 8 types in total. Another last concept we need to know about is creativity. So creativity is our ability in our minds to generate, to create, to discover new ideas, new solutions, and new possibilities. So that is about creativity. So when we talk about somebody is really creative, we most likely to say that that person has a lot of the new ideas, explore a lot of different paths, different possibilities, can come up a lot of new solutions. So that is about creativity. And the next chapter is about memory. So in memory, there's a lot of content. So you can see we need to know the meaning of these concepts from encoding to chunking. So this concept we need to know of. So for memory, it's a system that can store information. And there are 3 steps in the memory system. So the first step is encoding, so which is about this one. And the second one is storage. And the third step is retrieval. Right. So encoding, we need to know the meaning of what encoding is. So encoding is just input of information into the memory system. So in the memory system, there need to be new information. Put the new information into the memory system. That process is called encoding. There are different kinds of ways to encode the information. There can be automatic, there can be conscious encoding. And the next step, storage. So there are different kinds of storage system, different kinds of memory. There's short-term memory, there's long-term memory. So in the short-term memory is a temporary storage room that in which the brain is processing the sensory memory, sensory information in the short-term memory. So it's very temporary, and it lasts only for about 20 seconds. And the room for the short-term memory is also very small. The room is about 7 pieces of information, 7 items, at most 9 and at least 5. So that's about short-term memory. And after short-term memory, some information, if the information is rehearsed, is repeated many times, then those information is likely to go to the long-term memory. So in the long-term memory, we have those information for a very, very long time. About some information can be stored for entire life, such as our name, such as our parents' information, for example. And the space for long-term memory is limitless. There's endless space for the long-term memory. We can remember as much as possible in long-term memory. And in the long-term memory, there are different kinds of memory. There are different types. One type is explicit memory, and another type is implicit memory. So these two kinds of memory are both in the long-term memory. So what is explicit memory? Those memory can be consciously remember or recall. So we can remember those memory if we want. That is called explicit memory. It's in our consciousness. So some memory cannot be recalled or remembered. That is outside of our consciousness. We cannot retrieve them. That is called implicit memory. So the memory is that kind of memory system is working, but we cannot consciously know that kind of memory. And the third step in the memory system is retrieval. So we need to know what retrieval is. Retrieval is just getting information from the memory system. So encoding is put information into the memory system. Storage is store the information in the system. And the retrieval is get the information out of the memory system and recall them, know about them. And there are the two kinds of retrieval that we need to know of. The one is recall, the other is recognition, right? So recall is like just get the information as we want. If we want to get our name, what our name is, I can just recall my name. That's it. And then I do not have to use any hints or cues to recall to get the information about my name. That kind of retrieval is called recall. Recognition is that people must rely on some kind of hints or cues to identify information. People cannot recall that kind of information, but once the information is there, the right information is there, people can identify that kind of right information. So recognition happens when we do multiple choice questions. There are 4 options. Only one of them is right. So you need to identify the right information. That process is the typical recognition process. And these concepts, amnesia, suggestibility, the missing information effect, and the transience, these are about the problems of the memory system. So amnesia is just the loss of long-term memory. Just loss of long-term memory. That's a disorder. That's an amnesia. There are 2 kinds. You don't have to know there are 2 kinds, but you know basically what that disorder is. So 2 kinds. Sometimes people lost the memory before some kind of time point, lost the past memory, but can form the new memory. And another form of amnesia is that they have the past memory. They can remember well what's happened in the past, but they cannot form new memory. The encoding process is problematic. The encoding process is not there because of the brain damage or something else. The brain cannot work well to encode new information into the memory. And next one is called the suggestibility. So suggestibility is related to missing information effect. Sometimes the memories can be modified. Our memories can be modified. The memories that we used to have are true, are right, but sometimes we recall that kind of memory and we put it back. And in this process, the memory is modified. The content of the memory has been changed. For why? Because there are some kind of a misleading information from external sources. Because when we recall that memory, something happened outside in the outside environment. That thing or that events, those events are misleading. So those events make us to change the content of that kind of memory. So this phenomenon is called suggestibility. So it's a tendency, it's a phenomenon in our mind, in our memory system, that the misleading information can change the content of the memory when we recall those memories. The misinformation effect is that yeah, the misinformation effect is just the misleading information or incorrect information is exposed to that person. The person misremember the original effect, so the memory is modified. So that is called the misinformation effect. So suggestibility and misinformation effect are very similar concepts. Yeah, there is a experiment showing that showing what a misinformation effect is. So the information is very outside information is very misleading or incorrect, and change the content, modify the memory, change the content of the memory. And another type of problem in the memory system is forgetting. So one of the reasons for why people forget is called transience. So just the memory, just the accessibility of the memory is just decreasing over time. Over time, we have less and less accessibility of our memory. The memory is there. We just cannot remember them. We cannot just recall them when the time passes. So that's a study, a finding by Ebbinghaus. So in 20 minutes, 50% of the memory has been lost. We cannot recall 50% of the memory after 20 minutes. After 24 hours, 70% of the memory has been lost. That is the power of transience. And the next two concepts are rehearsal and chunking. So rehearsal and chunking are the strategies to enhance memory. Those are the strategies to help us to have a better memory. Rehearsal, just the repetition of information. Repeat the information many times. Just repeat the information. Rehearse the information. And that's the basic way to have a stronger long-term memory. That's the basic way that the short-term memory can go to the long-term memory. And the chunking is a particular way to enhance memory. So in chunking, we can organize some related information into chunks that can be managed very easily. So we can just, when we remember things, we can just remember those chunks. We don't have to remember particular pieces of information. So there is an example. There's a telephone number. There are 10 digits. How to remember that? If we just remember 10 digits, there's 10 digits, right? So in the that's it's longer than our short-term memory capacity. So in our short-term memory capacity, we only have like at most 9 pieces of information. So, but it's 10 pieces. We can put them into 3 chunks. We don't have to remember each of the digits particularly. We just organize the 10 digits into 3 chunks. The first chunk, there is 520. In the second chunk, 555. In the third chunk, 0467. So we can remember what is in the every chunk. Remember that. In every chunk, there are only 3 or 4 digits. And we can remember what is in the first chunk and what is in the second chunk, what is in the third chunk. And we can, after remember those content in the chunks, we can just remember the 3 chunks. So by that way, we can remember a lot of information within a short period of time. That is called chunking. And next we can go to, so this is about memory. So we have covered a lot in this chapter, but we need to know the meaning of these concepts. The chapter following the memory chapter is about developmental psychology. So in the first 3 chapters, we learn everything about cognitive psychology, learning, language, intelligence, memory, and other little topics. But if starting from chapter 9, we need to learn other psychology branches. Like this is in chapter 9, this is a developmental psychology. So in this chapter, we need to know the meaning of these concepts. First, developmental psychology. We need to know what developmental psychology is, at least. So it's a topic that studies the development, the changes, the growth of humans, how humans change and grow through different life stages, such as childhood, adolescence, adulthood, and death. So that is developmental psychology. Everything about the changes and growth throughout different life stages for humans, that is about developmental psychology. And the next parts, these concepts, these 6 concepts are all from one theory. That is the Piaget's cognitive theory of development. So this theory is very important for us to know about children's development, cognitive development. So sensory motor stage, and there's a pre-operational stage. So there are 4 stages in this theory. The first one is called the sensory motor stage. So we need to know what is in the sensory motor stage. When is sensory motor stage? So that is from 0 to 2 years old. In that stage, children or babies learn everything through direct experiences, such as their senses, such as their actions. They learn through those senses and actions. That is sensory motor stage. In that stage, children gradually develop a knowledge that is called object permanence. So object permanence is the knowledge that the thing is always there. It's not easy to just suddenly disappear. If one cannot see some kind of object suddenly, it means that that object is hidden or blocked. It does not mean that that object disappears. It's still there. The person just cannot see it. That is the knowledge that children need to learn in the sensory motor stage. And the next stage is pre-operational stage. That's in that stage. That stage is from 2 years old to 7 years old. In this stage, children start to know the meaning of symbols. They can use symbols to know about words, know about images and ideas. So they can understand words, images, and ideas. And also they use the pretend play to learn or explore the world. But yet they cannot understand logic or mentally manipulate the information. They can understand the symbols. They can understand what a pretend play is, but they cannot use logic or mental manipulation. They cannot take the perspective of others because they lack a theory, they lack of a kind of knowledge that is called a theory of mind. It's a kind of knowledge that other peoples have their own beliefs, perspectives, intentions, emotions, desires. Other people's inner spiritual world is totally different from theirs. That is called a theory of mind. So everyone has a mind. But if the children do not understand theory of mind, they will believe that everyone has the same mind as theirs. So their beliefs, their perspective, their intentions are same with other people's perspectives, beliefs, and intentions. Everybody's mind is one. That is because that is the results that the children cannot understand theory of mind. If they understand theory of mind, they will understand that everyone has a unique perspective. Everyone's mind is unique, different from any others. And the next stage is called a concrete operational stage. That is the third stage. It's from 7 to 11 years old. So in this stage, children can use logic to think about, but they can only think about logically about concrete events. They can use mathematics. They can perform mathematical operations. And in this stage, children start to have a kind of a knowledge which is called conservation. Conservation. So what is conservation? That's the concept that we didn't know about. Conservation is the knowledge that even if something changes its shape, that thing's mass, volume, and number stay the same. Right? So the typical example is the shape of the water is changed. If you pour the water in different type of glasses or mugs, different containers, this amount of water is this amount of water. The volume of water will not be decreased or increased just because the water is poured in different kinds of containers, right? That knowledge is called conservation. No matter how the shape of that thing is changed, the mass, volume, and number of that thing stays the same. That is what children start to know about in the concrete operational stage. And the next stage is formal operational stage. You do not have to know about it to take the test, but there is one, the last stage. People can think about logic, can use logic to think about concrete events and abstract ideas. So in concrete operational stage, children can only use logic to think about concrete events. And the next important concept is attachment. That's the concept in attachment theory. It's a very lasting and close psychological connection between people, specifically between the children and the caregivers. So it's very strong emotional and a psychological connection, very enduring and caring and a close relationship. That is attachment. There are three kinds of attachments. You can see the table here. There's secure attachments, anxious ambivalent attachments, anxious avoidant attachments. In secure attachments, the child can perceive the caregiver as the source of security or security base. The caregiver is a base of security. The security comes from the caregiver. The child believes that. The child sees the caregiver as a secure base. As a result, the child is free, feels free to explore the environment, to play in the environment. So that is a characteristics of secure attachments. But for anxious ambivalent attachments, the child cannot see the caregiver as a secure base. The child does not believe the caregiver can provide enough security. But the child wants that. The child tries to perceive the caregiver as a secure base, but the child fails to do that. So the child's attitude toward the caregiver is very ambivalent, very complex, ambivalent. Want the caregiver, but at the same time does not want the caregiver. When the caregiver is there, the child does not really explore the world because in their minds there's no sense of security. And another type is also an insecure attachment style, that is anxious avoidance attachment. So in anxious avoidant attachment, the child avoids or ignores the caregiver totally because the caregiver is just like a stranger that cannot provide a source of security to the child. So totally avoid the caregiver. Avoid a caregiver is just like a stranger. And next thing we need to know about is about Erikson's psychosocial view of children development, of human development. So you need to know the three stages. There are 8 stages in the Erikson's psychosocial development theory, and then you need to know 3 stages. So let's see them. So you need to know the first stage, trust versus mistrust. You need to know the main task in this stage. And the second stage we need to know about is the second stage, autonomy versus shape. And third one we need to know about is stage 5, identity versus confusion. So in trust versus mistrust stage, the main task is to build the trust that the basic needs can be met. That is the main task for the child to finish. That stage is from age 0 to 1, first stage of life. And the second one we need to know about is the second stage 2, from age 1 to age 3. The main task is to develop a sense of autonomy or develop a sense of independence. Need to develop a belief that I can do something by myself. I can do something based on my own volition. It's a sense that I have a freedom. I have the autonomy to manage my own life, manage my own behaviors. I do not have to rely on others, or I do not have to be controlled by others. That is the main task for the child to finish in this stage. The third one is stage 5. That is about adolescent years. It's from age 12 to age 18. It's a stage that people need to try different roles, try different social roles, and build up their own identities in the society. So identity is the position in the society for that person, the role or roles in the society for that person. So adolescents start to come to the society and try different roles, different positions in the society. That's the main task that people need to finish. Main task people need to finish in this stage. Identity versus confusion, stage 5. Okay, this is all the stuff about developmental psychology. Of course, there are a lot more knowledge covered in that lecture, in the chapter, but at least we need to know this stuff. And next we can go to the last chapter for the midterm 2, which is about motivation and emotion. So we need to know the meaning of these concepts. First, motivation. So what is motivation? That's the wants and needs that direct people's behavior. That is motivation. Something that can motivate us to do something, to take actions, to have some kind of behaviors. That is motivation. And there are different kinds of motivation. There's a biological drive. And there are also 2 kinds of psychological motivation. That is intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation. So in the lecture, we have talked about the difference between the 2 kinds of information, 2 kinds of motivation. Intrinsic motivation is involved when people's purpose is inside the activity. People engage in certain activity for the sake of doing that activity, not because for other purposes. But for extrinsic motivation, when people have extrinsic motivation, they do something, they engage in some kind of activity for other purposes, for some kind of other benefits or rewards, where they want to comply with other people's requirements, or they want to get the punishments from some people or some kind of events, so that they engage in those activities. The purpose of the extrinsic motivation is not inside of the activity, but outside of activity. That is extrinsic motivation. And the next concept, self-actualization, is a concept in the hierarchy of needs theory by Maslow, Abraham Maslow. So self-actualization is the top hierarchy need in his theory. So in his theory, there are different kinds of needs that people need to satisfy. And those needs are on the hierarchies. There are 5 hierarchies. People need based on the theory, people need to satisfy the lower hierarchy needs. When the lower hierarchy needs are satisfied, people start to pay attention to the higher hierarchy needs and start to pursue the satisfaction of the higher hierarchy needs. On the top hierarchy, that is self-actualization. So what is self-actualization? People reach their own full potential. People have potentials. They just reach their full potential. They can just be the best they can be. That is self-actualization. And another concept is emotion. Emotion is a state, some people's affective state, and that state is subjective because people have the subjective feelings when people have emotions. And that emotion is relatively intense, it's very strong. And emotion occurs because people have the reactions, have the responses to something, to some events, to something, right? So that is emotion. Emotion is different from mood, but you don't have to know what mood is for this test. But emotion, you don't know what that is. Appraisal is a concept in Lazarus' cognitive mediational theory. Let's see. Yeah, so Lazarus developed a theory that figure out how people have emotions or where the emotion comes from. So he discovered that when something happens or there is an event, people need to have a perception of that event for sure. But after perception, people have a process, cognitive process called appraisal. That is a evaluation in the mind, evaluation of the significance of that event or thing or object in terms of that person's well-being. So the mind will evaluate whether this event or thing will threaten or improve my own well-being, and to what degree. So that's evaluations of the significance of that event in terms of one's well-being. That is called appraisal. And after appraisal, there is a particular emotion. So emotion is a product of appraisal. Okay, so next we need to know the amount of and the names of basic emotions. So we know that some emotions are basic and universal to all humans. It means that every person has those emotions, no matter what. That's determined by our genetic makeups. As long as that one is a human, that one person has these types of emotions. So we need to know amounts. There are seven types. What are they? There are fear, anger, disgust, contempt, sadness, joy, and interest. So those are the 7 types of emotions that everyone has, and those are basic emotions. There are some emotions that are very complex and not basic, such as jealousy. So we haven't talked about jealousy in the lecture, but you can know that some emotions are very complex and based on the basic emotions. But these 7 emotions are very basic. And next, we need to understand hierarchy of needs theory and the drive theory. So these 2 theories about motivation. So hierarchy of needs theory is the theory that believes that people have all kinds of needs to be satisfied. We need to satisfy those needs so that we can live well. Because we are living creatures, so we need to have needs to be satisfied, to be met. So those needs are categorized or classified on different hierarchies. On the top hierarchy, on the bottom hierarchy, that is the physiological needs, such as the need for water, food, shelter, and warmth. The hierarchy above it, right above it, is security need. People need to have a feeling of safety. And the need above safety, that is a social need. People need to have connections or relationships with different kinds of relationships with other people. And also people need to belong to certain social groups, need to assimilate into the society, right? Need to have be some kind of social members, need to have friends, need to have family, need to have close relationships with other people. And the need above social need is called the esteem need. So the esteem need is about self-worth. It is about somebody's achievement, accomplishments, the social status, the contribution to the society, and the self-confidence, and so forth. Those needs are about whether this person is worthy or not in this world. And right above the esteem need, that's on the top hierarchy, that is about self-actualization. We have talked about self-actualization already. And self-actualization is a special one because it's different from other four hierarchies. For other four hierarchies, they may disappear. When they are satisfied, they disappear. For example, the need for food. We do not always have the need for food, right? So when we get enough food, we do not have that need anymore. If we do have enough safety, we do not have that need anymore. So when the need is satisfied, is fully met, that need disappears in our mind. That is for the lower four hierarchies, for the physiological, security, social, and esteem. So the features of these four hierarchies are like this. They will disappear or they will diminish when they are satisfied. But self-actualization is a different one. It will never diminish. It will never disappear. It's always there. People always have the need for self-actualization because it cannot be met at any moment, because you can be better and best, better and best, better. There's not best. You can be the best that you can be, but you can be better and better always, all the time. So the self-actualization need will not disappear. And the drive theory is about a biological drive. It tells us why people have biological drives. Because in our physical body, there is all kinds of different kinds of homeostasis. Homeostasis is a status in our physical body that the balance is the status is very balanced. The status is very ideal in when the homeostasis is maintained. For example, there is a right amount of nutrition, there is a right amount of water in our physical body when there is a homeostasis. But sometimes it's not balanced. There's a kind of a deviation from the homeostasis. So when there is deviation from homeostasis, biological drive appears. Biological drive is created in our mind to tell us, to tell ourselves that oh, there is the deviation from the homeostasis. We need to reach the homeostasis again. When the homeostasis is reached or maintained, biological drive disappears. It just disappears because we don't have the need to have those biological drives anymore. The example is that sometimes we are hungry. The feeling of hunger is a biological drive. It's a biological drive that tell ourselves that oh, we do not have enough nutrition in our physical body already. We need to get more nutrition to maintain the homeostasis. to go back to the homeostasis. So that is the basic logic in drive theory. So after reviewing the study guide for second midterm exam, so let's talk about some basic information about this exam. So I'll post the words and important information about the exam next week in announcements as well, but I will talk about the exam earlier in this video. So you can see what is about the second midterm in this week. So it's the format is very similar to the first midterm exam. So it will be available on November 3rd, November the 3rd, from the first minute of November 3rd. November 3rd is the Wednesday in that week. So from Wednesday, you can take the exam. But you must take the exam by the last minute of November 7th. So November 7th is the Sunday of that week. Is a Sunday. So the last midnight of Sunday, by the midnight of Sunday, you need to take the exam. And once you start to take that exam, you have 40 minutes to finish this exam. And the format is exactly the same with the last midterm. For the last midterm, it's also from Wednesday of that week to Sunday of that week. The format, there are 34 questions, and the 30 questions are regular questions, and the 4 questions are actual credit questions. Out of the 30 regular questions, 20 questions are multiple choice questions. So there are 20 multiple choice questions. There are 9 filling in the blanks questions. So in those questions, you need to type down the right answer in the blank. And there's 1 matching question. So you need to match the right concept, right answer with the right option. So as we have mentioned, the content of this midterm exam covers the content from chapter 5 to chapter 10. And the 4 actual credit questions are all multiple choice questions. So they are harder, but they are all multiple choice questions. This exam is the same with the last midterm exam, accounts for 15% of the total score. Each question accounts for about like 0.5% of the total score, including the actual credit questions. So yeah, so if you are right on 1 question, you can get 0.5% of the total score. So the 2 midterm exams account for like 30% of the total score. Yeah. That is the basic information about midterm 2. And you need to notice the new announcements this week or next week about the midterm 2. Okay, so hope you have enjoyed this video, and we can see in 2 weeks. Yeah, bye-bye.